Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
All right. So excited to have you back on the podcast, Ari. How's your day going?
My day's going wonderful. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Well, thanks for spending some time with me. We have a listener question around gluten sensitivity and gluten intolerance. And I feel like this is a deep topic that is also a really common thing that comes up. So why don't we just start from the basics? What is gluten sensitivity and how does that differ from full-on celiac disease?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so gluten sensitivity or gluten intolerance, a lot of times we use those terms hand in hand. That's coming up a lot more as more and more people are starting to do elimination diets and kind of seek, better digestive health, which we'll talk about. It's not just digestive too, but that's kind of why a lot of people go down that rabbit hole, I think. Gluten sensitivity is a wide range of things. Typically, we see that as brain fog, skin issues, joint pain, digestive issues obviously is a big one. And then actual celiac disease is different because celiac disease is actually more of an immune condition or an autoimmune condition. And so celiac disease, the only treatment is really to avoid gluten altogether. And it's really important that they do that because we see a lot of nutrient deficiencies, things like anemia, and down the line, things like osteoporosis and things as a result of that. So I would say they can both be very severe, but gluten sensitivity is not considered an autoimmune condition necessarily, whereas celiac disease is.
Yeah, and for listeners who've either had their own health concerns around this or have seen physicians or heard about this, typically celiac disease will be diagnosed with a constellation of symptoms leading to an anti-Gluten antibody test, which is really the hallmark of celiac disease if that's a positive test. But if it's a negative test, does not mean that you aren't gluten sensitive and that you can't still have lots of symptoms while ingesting gluten. So why don't we talk about those? You mentioned quickly brain fog, skin issues, joint pain, digestive issues, any other symptoms with gluten sensitivity? And is the diagnosis really just a clinical one? Are we just saying basically, when you eat gluten, foods that contain gluten, these are the symptoms you're having, you're likely gluten sensitive, or are there other diagnostic strategies, whether elimination diet or otherwise, that you like to use to get to the bottom of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like we mentioned, like digestive issues, but we also see a lot of things like rashes, especially on the back of the arms. It could also be allergies. It could be sinus issues, brain fog, or even other neurological conditions. I know there's some research in children with ADHD or even on the autism spectrum that feel or do better neurologically after eliminating gluten from their diet. So I think that any time there's some sort of imbalance, it's helpful to go ahead and look at gluten as a potential culprit. And generally, I like to start with just an elimination diet. I know that that's not what everybody wants to hear because it's hard work to eliminate things from the diet, and it takes effort and education along the way. But that's really going to be the first step. And then there are other tests that you can do. I know Cyrex offers some IgG, which is like a food sensitivity test. And we also look at, foods that maybe cross-react with gluten down the line if people are still having a lot of symptoms or issues.
Yeah. So if you're going to do an elimination diet, this is a question that I know patients often have. How long do I need to give it? Like, my life revolves around pizza. It doesn't, but I wish it did. And you're telling me I can't have bread or pasta or other things with gluten in it. How long do I need to give this elimination thing a try before I start to see if it's making a difference with my symptoms?
Yeah, generally I recommend at least 6 to 8 weeks. Ideally, it would be closer to 8 to 12 weeks just to fully make sure that all the gluten's out of the system. It can take a little while. I actually was reading something this week that said it can take 6 to 12 months to fully
Oof.
metabolize all the gluten out of the body, but I don't make people do it for 6 to 12 months. I really recommend around 8 weeks on average to see a noticeable change. If someone only can really commit to 3 to 4 weeks, I think that's better than nothing. And oftentimes they start to feel better before that 8 to 12 week mark anyway.
And are you seeing improvement in folks who do a reduction diet as opposed to an elimination diet? Like if somebody who can't quite make it all the way to zero gluten, but just cuts it dramatically, you think that's still valuable in terms of a diagnostic trial?
So I'm kind of a stickler with this, Mike. I really think that it's important to be as strict as possible. You can do anything for 6 to 8 weeks for the most part, but I don't ask that people jump right into it. I ask that they kind of plan and prepare to do that. So take inventory of what they have in their home, talk to their family about it, make sure it's a good time to start that. And then when the time is right, really just jump full into a gluten-free diet for that 6 to 8 weeks. And then we can start adding things back if it's necessary and appropriate for the person.
All right. So go all in if you're going to do it. Make it a good trial. Hidden sources of gluten that people might not suspect. I think that's probably something worth touching on. I mean, everybody, I think, in this situation knows, I can't have that slice of bread. But other than, bread, pasta, pastries, other things where people might not suspect gluten's going to be hiding.
Yeah, this is where it gets really frustrating. I think going out to eat this is probably the most difficult, but anything that has soy sauce, teriyaki sauce, things like that, which is actually used in a lot more than just Asian inspired dishes, can be problematic. I think there's a lot of, it's no surprise we have a lot of filler ingredients in a lot of our foods. And most of the time we see maltodextrin coming from corn, but occasionally it does incorporate some wheat products in there. Really, processed foods are fair game. So really make sure that you're reading the label. And since wheat is a common allergen, they have to list it on the label. So turn it around the back, look at the ingredients. If it's on the menu at the restaurant, talk to the wait staff. Hopefully they can get a gluten-free menu from the kitchen, which they actually use for allergies. So that's a little bit more foolproof way to make sure that you're not getting it when you're out to eat.
Yeah, and I think because celiac disease exists, you're seeing lots more of these gluten-free labels on products, which I think is great because that makes it really easy for you to tell if it's something that's truly gluten-free. Let's talk about going out to eat and social situations and travel, because if we're going to advise that somebody really do 6 to 12 weeks or 8 to 12 weeks of elimination, statistically that's going to involve at least going out to some sort of social situation. Hopefully people have that at least once every 6 to 12 weeks, and maybe even some travel as well. Any tips or tricks for, certainly the restaurant advice you just gave about, asking the wait staff to get a gluten-free menu from the kitchen seems good, but what about other social situations or navigating being gluten-free while traveling? I know that means don't eat what they're giving you on the plane in the little biscuits, but you shouldn't be eating those anyway, probably. But other tips or tricks there?
Yeah, so I think that when you're traveling, as often as you can bring some of your own snacks, I think that's the best way to go about it. So on the airplane, like I usually bring, RX bars. I might make a homemade trail mix. I might bring some turkey jerkies or even some protein powders or something like that you can safely fly with. If you don't have, anything planned or prepared to bring along with you, I think that fresh fruit, vegetables, obviously are always going to be safe. And then when you're at like other social events and things like that, so if say you're going to a conference and you're going to be traveling there and you don't have a lot of stuff that you can bring with you, calling ahead and talking to whoever's providing meals for the event can be one way to go about it. I know a lot of people don't feel super comfortable doing that in all situations, but I'm a proponent, like this is your health and you have to be an advocate for your health in the long run. And so what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to tell you that they cannot accommodate your dietary preferences. And then in that case, you just, figure out another meal for yourself, or you maybe, go and grab something down the street during your lunch break instead of whatever the meals are provided. And then social situations, I think hopefully, like you said, everyone's participating in social events and they're not letting themselves stay home for 6 to 8 weeks while they're doing this gluten-free trial. That would be a huge bummer. So I think that if you can bring your own, so offer to bring something to share that is gluten-free. And then that way you're not only providing something to the events and something that people can try and hopefully enjoy, but you're also knowing that you can stay gluten-free and feel really empowered to do that.
Yeah, that sounds like great advice. Let's pivot a little bit to a question that I just wanted to get your input on. You hear in popular media and from some integrative and holistic health practitioners about, European gluten versus New World gluten, and the fact that folks who are gluten sensitive in the United States will travel to France, say, and be able to eat bread and have no issues. What's the background there?
I actually have kind of a personal story about that. I've been gluten-free for about 10 years now, and I went to actually France kind of at the beginning of my gluten-free journey. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to eat whatever I want. Like, I've never been to France before, and I wanted to try all the foods. I ate whatever I wanted and had very minimal issues. I came back, I had maybe like a half a piece of bread and I was sick for 3 days. So I think there's something to this. And I think a big part of it is the different agricultural practices and regulations between the United States and other countries. So other countries tend to have pretty stringent restrictions on things like pesticide use, specifically things like glyphosate and things like that. And I think, we're kind of cracking down on that a little bit here in the United States, but it still is a very real issue. So I think that's part of it. I think the other thing is just all of the ingredients that we add to our breads and our different products here in terms of like fillers, making things go further, making things last on the shelves for longer. Whereas a lot of people are going to buy, fresh baguette weekly or every couple of days in cultures like France and other European countries. So I think, it's not only just the way that we grow it, but it's also the way that we package it and put it on the store shelves and things like that.
That makes a lot of sense. All right. We know that a fair amount of gluten sensitivity may be linked to our gut microbiome. And is that something that, certainly we look at genetic predispositions and we look at like GSTP1 SNPs and whether somebody's more inclined to be gluten sensitive. But are you using gut microbiome data to guide you in terms of whether there may be a gluten sensitivity present, or are you just saying, hey, let's just go straight to elimination and see what your symptoms do?
That's a really good question. I think when we look at, or when we think about the gut microbiome, and I know in the last podcast, we talked a lot about intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And the more often people have leaky gut, the more I think they're going to react to things like gluten and a lot of other foods. And so kind of the first step is let's really focus on healing the microbiome by introducing fermented foods, making sure that they're not having a ton of added sugars, caffeine, alcohol, a lot of really inflammatory, foods for our body. And so I think that by really focusing on gut health and making sure that we have a really diverse microbiome, that tends to reduce symptoms and reduce people from, experiencing more immune-mediated issues from gluten.
Yeah, all roads lead to the microbiome or lead from the microbiome one way or the other, it seems. All right, well, I think that's a great overview of your approach, the underlying mechanisms that are actually probably driving this, why you can go to France and have a baguette and not feel so lousy. I think the last question I had for you, and then we'll come back in a little bit and talk about dairy next, which is certainly, you know, the other of the double culprits that we often see in terms of causing symptoms. And I'll share a personal story around that one. But last question I had for you was around reintroduction. So, you know, I did it. I did my 10 weeks, let's say, of eliminating gluten from my diet, and wow, I feel amazing. My knees don't hurt in the morning. That rash has gone away. I feel sharp and clear. My brain, my stomach feels like less bloated, and I feel like $1,000,000. Do I now need to never eat gluten again, or is there a role for reintroduction, and sort of how do you guide patients who've made it through that elimination process?
That's a great question. And this is very much a personal preference. So I have some patients that they give up gluten and a week or so later they message me and they're like, oh my gosh, my knees don't hurt when I get up in the morning. Or I am thinking more clearly and I'm not getting that energy crash throughout the workday. And for those people, like they might not even think it's worth it to reintroduce gluten because they feel so great. And then there's other people that are like, wow, like I'm feeling a little bit better, but this is just really hard for me to maintain with my lifestyle or with the family. You know, if the family's not on board, that can be really, really hard. And so I think that what I ask people to think about is, number one, like, do you notice a difference? And how much is this going to impact your day-to-day life? But also, like, what's your main objective with this? Like, do you not care to think clearly throughout the day? Is it okay to like take a nap at 3 p.m. every day and kind of think about, you know, what's worth it for you? When you do start to talk about reintroduction, though, I think that if you know that you're going to have it every once in a while, or maybe once a year around the holidays is the time that it really is important for you to like have the option to have something that contains gluten. Well, let's start experimenting with it. And really the best way to experiment is try something at first that's just a single gluten containing grain. So something like barley would be a really great place to start because it's not high fermentable. So it's not like a high FODMAP that may also cause problems, but it's a gluten containing grain. So it's one of the best ways to reintroduce gluten at first. If you feel fine with the barley, then we can move to something the next week, like a piece of sliced bread that obviously is going to have a little bit more to it, and maybe cause a little bit more issues. And then if someone reintroduces the bread and they're like, okay, now I feel like crap, then we know that, you know, you might be able to have like a really good, like single gluten containing grain, like a barley soup from time to time. Having a sandwich every day at lunch is probably not going to be your friends. And so I think it's thinking about what's important to you. How often do you want to have the option to incorporate it, and kind of go from there.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Your nutrition insight, always I'm really grateful for it, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you want more daily health education, be sure to follow us on Instagram, which is filled with health optimization how-tos, grocery shopping lists, guided breathwork posts, myth debunking, and so much more. You can find us at Wild Health MD on Instagram.
Hey everybody, a quick note about our precision medicine training program. It's been a really popular course. We're constantly hiring health coaches and physicians, but we're only hiring them as we grow if they're trained in precision medicine. You don't get that in medical school or other places. And so we've developed this training program and we've completely revamped it recently. It's a lot more robust. So now there's still over 50 hours of live synchronous training. There's also all the asynchronous credit, over 50 hours of content. And as a physician, you get about 50 hours of AMA Category 1 CME credit, which is a nice benefit. for the health coaches going through the training program. It's now accredited by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching. So graduates are going to meet the requirement to sit for the board exam and become board certified health coaches. So there's a lot of benefits to that, not just the certification, but also when it comes to things like insurance reimbursement. So it's a really robust program. If you're a physician, a nurse practitioner, a PA, or someone that just wants to be a health coach, it's open to all of those categories. There's the 6-month program that's kind of the full program. And then we also have just a fundamentals of precision medicine course, which is completely on your own. It's online. It's all asynchronous. You still get the 50 hours of AMA Category 1, but it's self-paced. And you still have access to the online community, but not all the synchronous lectures as well. So if you're interested in checking that out, go to wildhealth.com/education. And we'd love to have you as part of our next class.